Hi there, welcome to another Xenography vlog. Today we're going to be comparing two cameras that are very similar indeed. There are the Leica and the Barnack Leica, the original Barnack Leica, and the fed Russian copy of the Barnack Leica. So what can we say about them? Well, let's first look at the general quality. The engravings on the Leica here are top of the Leica are very nicely done. They really are beautifully done. They've got some sort of black paint. I think it's some sort of lead paint put into there, and you can see the engraving really clearly, and it really is very smooth. Everything's nicely made about this camera. It's been described as a little jewel, mechanical jewel, and I think that's pretty accurate. The wind-on mechanism is so smooth you can hardly feel it, and the shutter sound is simply delightful. So we'll wind it onto a higher shutter speed. Oh, in fact we can't, we're on 1/500th there, that's 1/500th. Let's put it on a slower one. We'll put it on 1/60th. Again, the shutter sound is just lovely. It's magnificent. Let's take it back up to the top speed. It's just a very silent click, is all you can hear. And I think that's why these cameras still to this day have a good reputation for street photography. Turning to the fed, let's look at the fed Barnack copy. The early feds the very early feds were an exact copy of the Barnack Leica. This is a D, Fed 1D, which dates from 1939 to 1941, and it's got the engravings on the top there, and it says Fed. I'll turn it over so I can read it, and so you can read it, if you can see it. It says Fed NKVD SSSR Kharkovsky Kombinat EM FE Dzerzhinskого, which means, translated, I do have a little Russian, Fed NKVD, who were the forerunners of the KGB. They were the secret police of the time. I'm not quite sure why they marked their cameras like that, but they did. USSR Kharkov factory in the name of F.E. Dzerzhinsky, or Dzerzhinsky as I think he's known in English pronunciation. But if you just compare the two, top plates there, you can see fairly clearly the difference. Turn them around again. The engraving on the top is not so nicely done. The Leica has a silky smooth feel to it, whereas the Fed in fact doesn't. It's a little rougher in finish. But then I suppose the philosophy was not to compete with the capitalist system of manufacturing sort of shiny high quality goods. The idea was to make a good quality machine that worked well. If we wind on the Fed, it's stiffer and it's less smooth and beautiful in its operation. This one has not been, I must point out, this one has not been cleaned, lubed, unadjusted, whereas I think this one must have been, because it really does operate very smoothly, just like it was new. Let's try the shutter sound. So we've wound on, and what speed are we on? We're on 1/500th. So the shutter sound is quite a bit louder. Let's compare that again. Yeah, so you can see the difference there. There really is quite a difference there. The general finish is not quite as nice. They do look very similar. I mean, I'm saying the general finish isn't quite as nice. It isn't, but it is very nicely finished. This little Fed here is a beautiful little thing. I do love it. Both of them have pull-out lenses, so you pull it out and turn it, lock it into position like that. Let me show you again without putting my hand in the way. So you pull it out, unlock it, turn it to the right to lock it, and then it's locked in position, ready for shooting. This lens is an original Fed lens. It's a 50mm lens, and it's uncoated, and I think this is the very early one. There are later versions of this Fed lens. It's sometimes known as the Industar 10 or the Fed 10. It's uncoated and it will give you a lovely, lovely vintage look. There's some debate about whether it's a direct copy of the Leica Elmar. These are my thoughts. This is a Tessar design. Some claim it's a direct copy of the Elmar, some claim, oh no, this is a Tessar and the Elmar is different. In fact, from the research I've been able to do, the Elmar, the Leica Elmar, was in fact a Tessar design. And this does look very like the Elmar. It even has the little tab for the aperture there, as the Elmar does. So to change the aperture on this lens, you have to move this tab here. It's slightly stiff on this one, it needs a little clean. So you just move the ring there, move that tab there. So, since the Russians were copying German designs, I suspect this may be actually a direct copy of the Elmar. And even if it isn't, it gives you that lovely vintage look, uncoated, low contrast. It's a very, very sharp lens. It really is incredibly sharp. I've tried it on this camera and on the Sony A7, and it gives incredibly sharp results. The lens on the Leica, actually, I'm cheating a little bit because this is an Industar lens. This is an Industar 22. It's the same method of operation, so it's collapsible. You simply pull it out, turn it to the right, where it locks, and you're ready to take photographs with it. This is a coated version. It's an early Industar 22, very similar to the design of the Fed 10 or the Industar 10, except that this is a coated lens and it's actually slightly longer once you extend it by, I don't know, 5mm, maybe 3mm, something like that. And focusing is by Rangefinder. So you can see that both have the viewfinder window here in the centre. You can tell a fake Leica, by the way, because if it's square, as this one is, you'll see that the Leica viewfinder window has a little notch in it. So that's one of the ways you can tell a fake Leica, of which there are some around. The rangefinder on both of these is equally as good. They both give a very strong image, and in fact the later Feds give an even stronger image than the Leica. The later Feds from, say, I don't know, something like 1948 to the end of the production run, which I think was about 55, give a very, very strong rangefinder image despite their age. Turning them around. Oh, one thing I ought to mention, this is a Leica 3, so it actually has the slow speeds, whereas the Fed doesn't. None of the Feds, to my knowledge, had the slow speed arrangement. But having said that, it's not often that you need to use it, and there is a Z, which is directly copied from the German, meaning sight or time setting, which is equivalent to the modern bulb setting. So for long exposures, half a second, 1 second, you can in fact use that, and I've done that on several occasions. Let's turn them around and look at them. And again, they're very similar when you turn them around. The rangefinder window is here, as is the rangefinder window on the Leica. The Leica has a focus adjustment for the rangefinder window, which is beautifully smooth after all these years. I don't quite know how it remains that way. I think this camera must have been either not used very much or cleaned up, because that's a lovely action. The Fed doesn't have that, and there are occasions when that is a lack and you do need that. Having said that, those occasions are pretty few and far between. The construction, you can see the construction is very similar. Screws around here to hold the top plate and the shutter crate in place. So to actually get the body off, you undo these screws plus take off all the top bits here. Not for the faint of heart. Covering on the Leica is beautiful, lovely, feels soft and tactile in the hand. The Fed is slightly rougher, but it's still a nice covering, still a lovely vulcanite covering. This one does have a tiny little bit missing just here, which I intend to repair with hard black wax, which is a good tip if anybody needs to repair one of these kind of cameras. Again, actually, the Leica is slightly nicer in feel, but the Fed is not unpleasant in feel. These Zorki cameras, I believe, have a painted metal finish, so the Feds are superior in that respect to the Zorkis. One thing I should say about these early Feds is, I'll just turn this one around again. I was mentioning the lens, the uncoated Industar 10 lens. My understanding is that up to 1948, when coated lens production began, each lens was matched to each camera body. So you can't swap lenses too easily. So if I were to put this Industar lens on this camera, it may not focus correctly. If I were to put this Fed lens on this camera, it may not focus correctly, because the early Feds, up to I think 1948, don't have the standard 28.8mm Leica register, whereas the Zorki does. All of the Zorkis do have that 28.8mm rangefinder, lens register. That's proudly proclaimed in the Zorki 1 handbook, if you should happen to get a copy of that. Let's have a look underneath. Collapse the lenses. Okay, we can see that they're almost identical again underneath. The locking mechanism is the same. So we'll turn the Leica. The Leica says Auf und zu, which is German, of course, for closed and open. So we'll turn the Leica. We'll take off the base plate. Another way of noticing fake Leicas is that all but the very, very earliest Leicas had this little sticker here on the bottom, which is instructions about how to load the film and how to cut the film. And it says, don't draw out further than 10 centimeters. You may know that you need to cut the film before you load one of these cameras. I'll be looking at that in a later video. So there's the Leica on the inside, and let's have a look at the Fed. The Fed's a little more difficult to get off, as you can see, which may be a good thing. If the tolerances are tighter, then less light's going to get in. So they're very similar inside. Adjustments for the shutter blinds are here and here. long spring for the shutter mechanism release, and of course the removable take-up spool. Let's take it out of the Leica. You can see the spool there. Whoops. And if we take it out of the Fed's a little easier to take out because it has this part that will actually pull out and make it a little easier to get out. So the take-up spools, again, pretty much identical. I'm sure one would fit inside the other camera, but I've never tried. Again, the Leica pushes in much more smoothly, and just the general standard of workmanship is that little bit higher. So we'll put them back. So that's the comparison of the Fed and the Leica. Dimensions are identical. You can see there that actually I can't stand them on a flat surface, but if I show you there, the dimensions are absolutely identical, both in width and in length. And you can see that in height they also are absolutely identical. So there we are. One more way you can tell, one more difference between rather the Leica and the Fed is if I remove the lens here. Both have an M39 thread. Again, the Fed being very slightly rougher to undo. And if you look closely inside each camera, you'll see that the Leica has a roller mechanism to operate the rangefinder, a little roller on the cam, whereas the Fed doesn't. It has just a little piece of metal that bears on the cam and rubs against it. So that's another example of, well, how to spot a fake Leica, and also the nicer engineering that took place with the Leicas. So in conclusion, both of these cameras are very old. Both of them take a little while to learn to use. Both of them are extremely rewarding to use. I love both of these cameras. This camera cost me £150, which I'm very glad I spent. It's entirely worthwhile, entirely worth it. This camera cost me £35, which again I'm very glad I spent, and I think it was very much worth it. The question is, if you've not used one of these rangefinders before and you're thinking of getting into early rangefinder photography, like a Barnack photography, just to see how it works and just to get a little feel for it, is it worth spending £150 on the Leica as against £35 for the Fed? Or put another way, is the Leica 5 times better than the Fed? And the answer is probably no, it isn't. It is better than the Fed, but I don't think it's 5 times better. So I think that if you want to try very early rangefinder photography, and don't forget the Barnack Leicas and the Fed copies were the first to use 35mm cinema film, or the first to use it, popularise its use. If you want to try one of these, then the Fed is a very, very worthwhile investment. And if you get a good one that's been properly adjusted and cleaned, lubed and adjusted, then the experience of using it is almost identical to the experience of using the Leica. I love both of these cameras. and I'm glad that I own both of them. Both of them have given me very great pleasure in use. So it really is your decision, but that's my comparison between these two cameras. So again, thanks for watching. Please do tune in next time. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye bye.